Madam Speaker, side opposition has built their case on the idea of harm, primarily the harm that comes from violence. Over the courses of our speech, however, we're going to tell you the variety of different harms that are present in what is being proposed by their side and which has not been discussed so far. I'm going to talk to you, first of all, about the idea of governmental responsibility towards people and how allowing autonomy in this nature will take away from that. Second of all, I'm going to talk to you about why allowing secessionist movements, whenever they resort to violence, sets a terrible precedent in international affairs. Third, I'm going to talk to you about the idea of how interstate problems and inter-community problems are going to be magnified by this move. And fourthly, I'm going to talk to you about how the different problems that have been identified so far by the government, by that side, is superficial, and how the real problems can only be solved by not going in for giving them autonomy. But before moving into all this, let me deal with a few rebuttals, right? So what we've essentially heard from them so far is this idea that if people who are after the two states have been split, if somebody wants to make the choice that I am a Rohingya but nonetheless I want to stay in Myanmar, their choice is somehow not being affected. However, Madam Speaker, this is simply not true, right? Think about how it works. You're splitting it into a different region, and now you're saying that all of a sudden you're in the new Rohingya state. But if you want to be a Burmese, if you want to continue to be in Myanmar, you have to make the necessary transition from that region physically into a new region. I mean, we have seen this kind of exodus happening across history, right? And we have always seen how intense amounts of violence, intense amounts of difficulties have been associated with such kinds of exodus happening. We saw that most primarily in the very example that they brought out, right? When India and Pakistan split up and they had the partition with people moving into each other's territory, we saw the amount of intense violence and murder that went on around. We think it's a really bad idea to engage, to promote that kind of an exodus between countries. Moving to my first point, the idea of governmental responsibility. Madam Speaker, this works on two levels. On the first level, I'm going to tell you that we believe that states have a duty towards their citizens and that you should not be promoting a measure that allows them to abdicate this responsibility and simply throw these people out of the country, right? Because essentially, what conceding to their proposal will do is that whenever any state does not like a particular group of its citizens, it now has the freedom to discriminate against it, deny it resources, and ultimately, if there is some sort of a violence, then just throw them out of the country, right? But this is something that has been previously mentioned. And now I'm going to give you a clear extension of this point about governmental responsibility. Madam Speaker, what is also involved over here is the idea of the governmental responsibility of the welfare of the people of the new Rohingya state. Because they still haven't told you how the new Rohingya state will be able to take care of its people, right? Let me give you a characterization of the region that we are talking about. The Rohingyas are primarily concentrated in a small area of Myanmar that is devoid of resources, which is the prime reason why most of the Rohingyas are not asking for a separate country, but are asking for greater say in the electoral policies of Myanmar itself. Because they also understand that if they split from the country that has the resources to support them, it's going to result in their own welfare being destroyed. We think that the new Rohingya state will not be able to sustain the welfare of its own people, and we don't think these people should be condemned to this fate as a result of their policy. Even otherwise, Madam Speaker, they have told you on the one hand that Myanmar is a state that hates the Rohingyas, right? But then they come and somehow assume that when the state that supposedly hates these people is now going to give them autonomy, they're somehow going to select some prime land and give it to them. That's simply a ridiculous suggestion, right? If you do ask Myanmar to allow such autonomy, and if you accept their own submission, then we can possibly and reasonably conclude that these people are not going to be given the opportunity to have a decent welfare in the new state. Therefore, Madam Speaker, we think that this idea of maintaining governmental responsibility and of enforcing Myanmar's governmental responsibility towards all its citizens, including Rohingyas, is only supported by not granting them autonomy. Second, Madam Speaker, we think it's a bad idea to grant secessionist movements success whenever they resort to violence, because that's exactly what they've told you, right? Their main case line has been that whenever there is violence, we should allow these people to separate as a solution to the violence. The clear message that is being sent across is that if you have a problem, I mean, for whatever reasons, whether it be for personal political ambitions or personal electoral ambitions, if you want to have your own state, all you need to do now is to engage in the same sort of violence. This is essentially giving you an incentive to break the law and order situation in your own country in pursuit of having your own state. Yes,
when you yourself can't solve the situation in the state, when the problems cause blatant violation of human rights, What do you propose we do?
Thank you, sir. This takes me straight to the substantive about identifying the underlying causes of the situation in Rohingya, right? Because all we've heard from them so far is that somehow Myanmar hates Rohingyas. I mean, we need a little bit more analysis over here. The reason why Rohingyas have been suffering, and I'll tell you in a bit how we're going to solve this problem, is because there has been a systematic denial of resources towards these Rohingyas. And these resources include things like electoral rights. They also include more traditional resources such as the plain physical resources that are denied for the welfare of these people. What we are telling you is that you need to identify these underlying causes. It's not the case that the Rohingyas spontaneously erupt into violence whenever they feel so. If you do give them the resources that they are demanding, we tell you that that provides a much more lasting solution to the conflict that has arisen between these two groups. Why is achieving this lasting solution particularly important? This is where I'm going to deal with my fourth substantive, where I'm going to talk to you about the magnification of the problems that currently exist between these two communities if you give them autonomy, right? Somehow, this side has this wonderful idea that if you grant nationhood to people who are different, it's going to resolve all the differences between them. That's ridiculous, Madam Speaker. If anything, granting them nationhood only adds an extra layer of distinction between these people. So where in the past you had religion distinguishing them, now you not only have religious distinctions, but also distinctions of nationality. And why is this a particularly bad thing to do? Because history tells us that where nations have had this additional layer of nationality put into existing differences between them, there has been lasting cases of conflict. Once again, if you look at the differences between India and Pakistan, again an example that they brought up over here, right? These were states that were formed on religious lines and a layer of nationality was added to them after splitting them on the basis of religion. If you look at the amount of conflict that has ensued in the Kashmir region that exists between these two. If you look at the wars that have happened between these two countries in 1965 and 1999, and if you look at the extreme amount of terrorism that flows from both countries to each other's countries, you will understand that the underlying problems, the underlying differences between these people have only become magnified as a result of creating yet another barrier of distinction between them. Because essentially now you're telling them that there's another reason why they're different from us and they do not deserve our consideration. Therefore, Madam Speaker, what we have told you today is that fundamentally there's a governmental responsibility that needs to be enforced and not allowed to be abdicated through granting autonomy whenever a state wants it. We don't think a bad international precedent of allowing secessionist movements should be stuck. And for the other reasons that I've told you, we continue to propose that there should be no autonomy.
Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen, today the debate from the opening bench was narrowing down from the government side about the case of Myanmar and Rohingya, the problem in the status quo. But the problem is that they just consider and the religious problem in the state between them, and then they just like considering they should not be to grant the autonomy and rights to make that state because under that religious line. But we are saying that is firstly, even though they just narrowed down to the debate in that case, we'll just engage into their case firstly. First rebuttal, I have first thing that I'm doing is that I will rebut to the government cases, and then secondly I will provide a clear extension from the opposition side, which the opening opposition claimed about the religious cases, but we will provide the different actor which is at this and in the general ways that we are watching in this motion, in the status quo that we have to consider. So firstly, the thing that from the opening side was coming out was because of the Rohingya and the monks, the people who wants to be out of that country wants to stay in that country, so that should be the motion should be released. But the thing is, firstly, they just saying that they are under the assumption that only those kind of monks and the people from the religious are talking are the one they only consider about the people. But the thing is that we should consider who is really, what is the benefit, what is the thing that we have to maintain. The first thing that we should consider is that people, human rights, that there are suffering from that religious line, because as we opening bench, opposition told you that there is harm, that the violence, people are dying because of that religion. So by dividing and give them the autonomy to have that religious based upon their religious, that makes human beings and that violence to be less in that status quo. Please sit down. And secondly, they mentioned about the government responsibility. Exactly, sir. What exactly, ma'am? What is the government's role in this status quo? What is government should do? Government. The first thing that we should consider is the human rights. People. We have to reduce the violence that exists in the status quo because of that religious problem. So the thing that government should do, the government should maintain, is that we have to protect people and avoid that violence that is existing in that region. So by giving grant the autonomy to the state, that will reduce the violence that is existing in the status quo. And thirdly, from the member that we say that, and again about the example of terrorism between those countries that we provide from the opening side, that's the reason why we are saying that we should separate the region and give them the autonomy to the state because of that religion. So make more peace in that regions, and then give them more rights and autonomy to have and maintain their rights to be considered in that the religious should be have. What is the nature of religion? Nature, which will be directly related to my extension, which we will consider in the genre, not just talking about the religious people, but by dividing the states of the religious lines, we should consider the people who are not in that religion, in the belief in that religions. Firstly,
on that point,
what is the basic nature of religion? Religion is something they try to express their own beliefs and express and have their own freedom of speech to say. So that will gonna express to the in general people in that region. So by dividing and giving them autonomy to the state, that will make and that will protect the right and protect autonomy and people in that region in that region. So. And the thing, and second level of analysis is that in the historically the religion is always exclusive to each other. That is because of the nature of religion, which I said that they have their own belief and they have their own belief to express to others. So
on that,
so because of that, just by saying not giving them the divide that autonomy and then just see as the status quo is just going on. We should give the people we should give the autonomy to have their own religions, to make and to reduce and avoid that violence that is occurring in the status quo. So that can solely and that can absolutely prove and provide and solve the problem in that region.
So now,
So before I move on, yes.
so according to what you say, people of a different religion should not ever be able to live together in a country, right?
I
Clearly,
don't
the
know.
value of nationality overrides religion sometimes, doesn't it?
I got you. As I told you that the region we should consider. I told you that in general that the people should be considered in that region. Not just talking about the religious people. We should consider the in general that I clearly told you about. I explained about this, and then as I explained again and again in the rebuttals, what is the role of governments should do? Government is accountable to protect the people, protect the rights of people in that sense, that the individual have their own rights. So by giving their autonomy to their regions, that would the government will gonna protect the people in general, also the atheists who do not have beliefs will have their own rights and be protected from the government. So as I provide you the clear rebuttals and the extensions which is differentiated from our opening governments, I clearly oppose. Thank you.